And many thanks to Mrs. Zelenska for sharing that with us. She herself is obviously a striking example of Ukraine's soft power. As soon as the foreign minister joins us, or is able to join us, I should see him pop up on one of our monitors here, and then we'll spend some time talking to him. But I'm delighted to now welcome the panel. Deborah Bonetti, who's director of the Foreign Press Association here in London. Its members come from about 250 outlets, I think, across 60 countries. And she herself is a correspondent for Il Giorno, the Italian newspaper, and has written a book about Brexit. Andrew Neil is well known as a former editor of the Sunday Times, former BBC presenter and interviewer, long-time political commentator. That hasn't, I don't know when that began, but it certainly hasn't ended.
I can't remember either.
He has his own interview show on Channel 4, and he's the chairman of the weekly news magazine, The Spectator. Nusar Yassin is a YouTuber, social media influencer with a huge global reach, 20 million followers on Facebook. Yassin, I counted yesterday, 11 million subscribers to his YouTube channel. He's on pretty much every other platform as well. Videos on many topics. I think if there's one word that links them, it's probably positivity, but you do feature a whole range of content. And he grew up in a Palestinian family in Israel and now lives in the UAE. Welcome to you all. I think we should start with Ukraine and its demonstration or use of soft power because of what we've just heard, because of the last year, because of the anniversary. Andrew, what do you make of the way that we have seen Ukraine project itself beyond the battlefield?
Well, I think the war has revolutionized our attitude to Ukraine. Before the war broke out, people rather looked down on Ukraine. They thought it was corrupt. It was a kind of smaller version of Russia. It had its kleptocrats, its oligarchs, and so on. Was it really a democracy? I think some of that criticism was unfair, but nevertheless, that was the general view. But after the war, after the unprovoked invasion, our attitude started to change. It changed, I think, for two reasons. One, we saw the incredible bravery and fighting abilities of the Ukrainian army, which we didn't think it had, and it had done that, given Mr. Putin something of a shock. I think he's in for another one this spring, come the offensive. But I think also Ukraine was very clever in using social media to project the situation it was in, what the Russians were doing, the barbarity, the Nazi-style barbarity of the Russians in Ukraine, and of the fighting spirit of the Ukrainian people, and of course, having Mr. and Mrs. Zelensky at the top. I mean, you couldn't wish for two better people to project the values of your country. So I think a combination of Ukraine's own tenacity and its very skillful use of social media has created a revolution in the attitude. And it was helped just by the fact people don't really realize Ukraine was pretty hot on digital development before the war. There's a lot of companies had invested there, and a lot of people who knew what they were doing with digital technology, and that has come to fruition. Not as important, perhaps, as the artillery and the soldiers in the field, but important because the soft power has enhanced, I'll just finish on this, the soft power has changed our attitudes, and that has enhanced our attitude towards giving them more hard power. And one of the really interesting things, because I've had so many people tell me, well, the Western solidarity, it'll break. If it goes on too long, it will break. Well, it hasn't broken. Indeed, NATO has never been more united. The Europeans are united in helping Ukraine. Poland is becoming the country that really matters in Europe in this regard now. President Biden has been solid. America has given more help to Ukraine than everybody else put together. We are as one on this to help them see it through. So I think it's been very important.
Deborah?
Yes, I would like to add, we have quite a few Ukrainian journalists who've joined the FPA recently, since the war started. And what I would like to add to what Andrew just said is that Ukraine has managed to put forward one message in so many ways, on so many different social platforms, social media platforms and everything, but the message has been one. And so it has been very, very strong. It's being brought forward by all kinds of people, not just the politicians there, not just the president and Mrs. President, but also all the soft power actors, including not only journalists, but actors, musicians, you know, everybody has
Eurovision last year.
Yes, I mean, that was a fantastic song, by the way. And, you know, everybody has been playing towards the same goal. And I think that's really important. And just to finish, you know, the artillery might not be as strong as others, but what the soft power that they have deployed has done is that it's inspiring. It gets the heartstrings. You know, you feel inspired by watching what Ukraine has done. You want to learn more about Ukraine. You don't particularly want to learn if you just see, you know, military might.
Yassine, as someone who knows all about like how to use different platforms and how to reach people, what do you make of how Ukraine's done it?
Yeah. First of all, hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. Wake up. Let's chat. To my esteemed panelists, I hope
They
you
were
agree.
all awake when we were speaking.
No, they were awake. They were awake.
Don't give us this YouTube bollocks here. They're all awake.
First of all, everybody was like this, and then you got like this. I look forward to agreeing and disagreeing with you guys very soon.
Okay.
So I'll tell you a very honest story. Okay, when the war broke out, my first impression was, this is not my war, right? I'm from Israel and Palestinian. That's my war for 75 goddamn years, right? So I felt super occupied, and I didn't pay close attention to it. Then I went to the Grammys in Los Angeles or Vegas or whatever. And then there was Lady Gaga performing, Justin Bieber performing, and then in the middle of their performances, President Zelensky shows up. I was like, wow, that's really odd. Like, where did this happen? How did a president of Ukraine show up to the Grammys? And that's when I realized they're really good at soft power. Then I went home and I opened my TikTok and I saw a Ukrainian teenager just like pointing at their destroyed house. And that's when I realized, oh my God, this is a real thing. So thousands of journalists, thousands of BBC
That's what we
journalists.
did too, didn't we?
Yes.
We went home and opened our TikTok.
I
and thought,
didn't realize there was a war till I looked at TikTok. But
me
once
neither.
it was confirmed by TikTok,
Yeah.
with its wonderful
Go on, you
curation,
said-
and
hold on, sorry.
and the Chinese government has said it was all right.
Journalists like
Then
Andy
we're
spoke
fine.
about it for hours and hours and I didn't listen. Somebody on TikTok spoke about it for 10 seconds and I listened. Why is that?
Hang on, so that reached you in a different way.
Yes.
And there'll be millions of other people, obviously, like you, who were reached in that
No, not
in that
millions.
way.
I'm so sorry. This is what, 300
Billions.
people? Twitter is what, 300 million people? Facebook is 2 billion goddamn people. BBC has what, 10 million followers? That's cute. But sorry, no offense.
He doesn't work there anymore.
I'm sorry, I respect you a lot, guys, everybody. But what I'm saying is the scale of Facebook and TikTok is unprecedented. 2 billion people going on Facebook every single day. And if you are not controlling the conversation on Facebook and TikTok, then what the hell are you doing?
What are we doing, Andrew?
Sorry.
How many goddamn people follow you?
Only 1.3 million.
Okay.
Sorry.
This could be just a battle of the followers, which obviously we don't want it to be. There are many ways to reach people, right? I think we can all agree with that. I think one of the interesting things, Andrew, is that actually they have been, as you say, and perhaps we'll talk about this. Hopefully, if we get to speak to the foreign minister, we'll ask him about how long and how much of a strategy this has been for a long time. But don't you find yourself looking back now to 2014 and thinking, why didn't we wake up to all of this at that point?
Well, there were some people who said we should wake up. But I'm afraid President Obama sold the pass because we needed America to take the lead, and he didn't take the lead. And at the time, Europe Germany was still in this bizarre situation where he thought if it bought Russian gas, it could control Russia, its worst instincts, and so on. French foreign policy was still that it could deal directly with Russia, one-on-one. French have always felt they had a special relationship with Moscow. Britain did want to take a tougher line, but it couldn't get the Americans on side. And there were shades of the 1930s here. You know, we didn't do anything when Hitler moved into the Ruhr Valley. We didn't do anything when he ended the demilitarization of the Ruhr. Didn't do anything when he took part with Anschluss in Austria. Didn't do anything when he took the Sudetenland. Didn't do anything when he took the rest of Czechoslovakia. Of course, if we'd had TikTok, all that would have stopped. Hitler said, no more of the TikTok in Sudetenland. And it took us finally to Poland to do. I think this time we've moved a bit more quickly. It's difficult. You know, we all wanted a peace dividend after the Cold War. No, we didn't really understand, as we didn't with Hitler in the 30s, just how aggressive, how revanchist Mr. Putin was. His desire to recreate a greater Russia, not a Soviet Union, but a greater Russia, which meant complete control of what they called the near abroad. So it could have been done, but it's been done in time. It's been done in time this time. It's better than the 30s.
Okay, let's just pivot away from Ukraine for just a moment to talk about both about technologies and platforms, but also about perception of the UK, because all of you here, I think you know, will be hearing from a former Prime Minister shortly. But Deborah, it's interesting to see where the UK is in this soft power index after a year when we had 3 different prime ministers and 2 monarchs. So it was a very eventful year. What do you make of how the UK?
I was surprised to see
surprised to see the UK up there.
Yes, because even though this is a great country, and of course, you know, I live here and I love it. I'm Italian, by the way. You know, I'm surprised to see it still up there. I wonder whether the books have been cooked. I shouldn't say that.
But you can't say that.
There are hosts. What I was trying to say is that, you know, after Brexit, I think that the perception of this country, in particular in Europe, has changed. And it has become abroad a bit less friendly. It feels much more hostile towards immigrants of all kinds. All the strikes that we see, you know, have brought it to a point where people are asking, is it gone back to the 70s? What's going on in Britain? All this political turmoil. You know, again, just a reference, you know, I come from Italy. This is political turmoil. You know, it's serious. And I have experience of Italian political turmoil, and this is right up there. So, you know, I do think that I'm surprised to see it in second spot, and I think it can do better. You know, at least get to first spot. But
that's impossible.
If the books are,
you can't take the US.
No, well, exactly. I don't know if the perception.
Deborah, may I say that maybe your sense is slightly out of date in that political turmoil in that very turbulent period, no doubt, was the case from the summer onwards and before. That perhaps we're now at the start of this new year in a slightly different place, including with Brexit.
Well, including with Brexit, Northern Ireland Protocol is still not solved. We call it Windsor Framework now, but that's still not, it hasn't gone through. Are you still awake, or shall I do a TikTok?
I'm fully awake.
Okay.
We need the Windsor Framework TikTok. I'm sure it exists.
Guys,
yes.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I saw you dozing there for a second. No, I don't think it's solved. I think Brexit is not solved at all. We're not at the end of it. Yes, we have a prime minister that stayed in power now, you know, for 4 months, I think. That's not a lot. And
it's a record.
Well, it's a record with the Tories recently, yes, but, you know, it's not a lot. And I do think that, yeah, there is more to do.
Well, Yassine, let me ask you, what do you think the perception of the UK currently is then? You live in the UAE, you're a Palestinian from Israel. What's the sense?
Like, honestly, if you want, I could
good.
bullshit an answer and pretend to be smart.
Well, why change?
But like, I don't want to pretend.
Do you want to try TikTok and see what to say?
I mean, I'd love to. I don't think you have it installed. But the perception
Actually, no,
of the UK is not something I think about on a daily basis. So I cannot give an answer because I don't think about the perception of the UK because it's such a tiny thing for us, right? There's 197 countries. We don't think about the perception of the UK every single day.
But, well, let me ask you then how you do work for governments sometimes, don't you? Sometimes
government.
with governments, okay.
Big difference.
As in videos, but there are times when your content is paid for by a government.
Correct.
Right. And what are the most striking examples of that lately? Who have you chosen to work with and not work with?
Yeah, so here's something I've noticed, okay? Which is, in the past, big governments used to go to established media, established magazines to try to change their image and help them with soft power. And now, in the past 5 years, big governments are now changing that direction and going to individuals instead. So instead of going to the BBC, they're going to David or to Andrew or to
They do
Deborah.
both, I think.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. So actually, we've worked with many governments from Denmark to Singapore to the UAE, and our primary purpose is to promote trade, tourism, and bring people together. However, sometimes you get approached by the Chinese government, for example, right? And they say, we want you to promote Xinjiang, the tourism in Xinjiang. And you're like, well, that's not something we can do. So there are some limits to what you can do and what you cannot do. But what I'm telling you today is that governments have figured out a cheaper way to get soft power, which is to go directly to the source, the content creator.
How do you label, if you're doing a campaign essentially for the UAE or any other, how do you label that?
Yeah, so the labeling of sponsored campaigns, whether it's for an app company, a startup, or a government, is only legally required in the US. Luckily, there's not 190 other countries that are not the US. So I don't live in the United States, so there's no legal requirements to do that. However, it's very obvious in the video that this is supported by the brand or the company or the government or whatever.
You don't label it?
I don't label it, no.
Okay. And you don't, do you think that's, like, what about the people who don't realize and who think you've just gone there?
Well, I think governments have been doing it for decades. Have you labeled the BBC on YouTube as a state a broadcaster? Have you?
It's not a state broadcaster.
Okay, whatever.
It's a public service broadcaster.
Okay, Al Jazeera, Russia Today.
Al Jazeera is a state broadcaster.
No, but it was only labeled last year.
But it's funded. It is funded in. Al Jazeera is funded in a different way to how the BBC
It is
funded.
not the job of independent media or proper journalists to burnish the image of governments or companies. Our job is to hold them to account, to expose them when they do wrong or are incompetent, inefficient. We're not propagandists for them. You're a propagandist for the UAE and its companies.
Okay.
We are not. We are not. And I've published 70 magazines in the UAE, so I know how it works on that. And I know the controls that you have to go through. Our job is to hold government to account. I can never remember the government coming to me, whether the BBC or The Economist or the Sun Times, The Spectator, asking me to improve their image.
Can I respond?
Because they know that the first thing we do is government approaches media to improve
But you might
image.
have run.
We're not doing
but
it.
you might have run ads. I'm sure you did run ads.
Yeah, well,
ads
yeah.
are different.
No, but that, I think that's probably the
No, he's
parallel
making
you're
content.
drawing.
First of all, just for a second, propaganda is not a bad word. Just to frame
No, it is,
propaganda.
actually.
No, propaganda
No,
is
it is a
basically
bad word.
sending a message. Maybe for someone in the UK it is. That's number one. Number two is we've given media to people like you for hundreds of years, and you only cared about Kenya when there's a bomb attack. So now everybody thinks Kenya is full of bomb attacks. So yes, your job is to hold government accountable, but as you do your job, you have shaped public perception in a negative way for 195 countries where the majority of people still think the Middle East is just deserts. So have you done your job? I don't think so. There's a lot of other things that BBC will never say about the UAE, which is actually objectively good. Who's going to say it?
Like?
Yeah.
Okay, 25% of the UAE's electricity comes from nuclear energy now, which is sustainable energy. Let's say
There's no reason,
the
but
piece-
Yassine, there's no reason that wouldn't be covered on the BBC.
Yeah.
But I've reported on that, and one of the reasons I reported...
And how many views did it get? No, that's true. You
But
reported
hold
that,
on,
but
look,
who listened?
you've raised an example.
But who listened?
The fact that the UAE has invested in nuclear power, it is done so that it doesn't have to use its fossil fuels to generate electricity. The interesting thing too, it also links it with desalination, because nuclear power depends on a load factor, and desalination, you just keep on doing the same thing all the time. But the reason why it was an interesting story, even for British newspapers or broadcasters, was that UAE had gone to South Korea for the technology, and they did it in record time and on budget. Whereas we've gone to the French, who've now 5 years over and twice over budget.
Is it only 5 years?
It was, well, it's got a long while before it opens. They haven't opened the one in Helsinki yet. So these were stories that are all done. These are, and the idea that the whole world thinks that the Middle East is just a desert is complete nonsense. The UAE itself is packed with international media. It's got its own media center where you get a special license to operate from the government.
Deborah, I just want to talk about a different part of the world, which is Europe. You're Italian. You can see in this soft power index that Germany holds a very strong position, consistently strong position. What do you make of overall European media outlets, and to what extent they project a global reach for their individual countries?
Well, the difference between the UK's position towards international media and the general position of many European countries towards international media is completely different. So I think that soft power, apart from what he's been talking about, which is more sort of ads in my mind and not journalism, and I'm not, you're not posing as a journalist, so that's absolutely fine. But as a journalist, you do have to filter, you do have to do your job. And so the best way to do that is to have access. And if a country is interested in sort of, projecting its soft power, it really needs to welcome international media as well as its own. This country is still not doing that very well. And I do think that the problem for most of us here, and basically the Foreign Press Association here in London is the biggest in the world, and it's the oldest. And there's a reason for that. It's the biggest because this country is interesting to so many other countries abroad. And also, because it's the oldest because right from the start, 1888, by the way, that was when it was founded, people started arriving here to try and cover Jack the Ripper stories, and they couldn't get anywhere. And so they got together so that they could have a little bit of leverage with the various...
Sorry, so you think the UK is not welcoming to international media?
No, not particularly. I'm not saying it's not
No, but in what way? To explain, I'm very surprised.
Yeah, well, we don't get any kind of automatic access, which is what you get to government briefings. It takes a lot of grafting from the FPA and also from individual journalists who want to get... who want to write, for instance, a profile of Keir Starmer. That's difficult to get if you're an international journalist. If you're a British journalist, no problem whatsoever. And I'm not casting any shade on...
I'm not so sure about that.
Well, okay. No, I don't want to cast any shade on the Labour government
Try getting an interview with Boris Johnson, who's coming up shortly.
Yeah.
It's the only reason I'm here. I thought I might grab him for an interview on the way out. Can I just pick up on something that was said earlier about Britain and soft power? I'm not in the least surprised that Britain is second only to the United States in soft power. This country has been a soft power superpower for many, many years. It's just the British are so down on themselves, they don't realize it. And one of the reasons it is because it's so broadly based as a soft power superpower. It's across the whole range of creativity and of audio-visual activities. It is true that the past couple of years have not done much necessarily to enhance Britain's overall reputation, but I would say two things about that. One, perception lags reality. And it may be that the global perception of Britain is still a couple of years out of date. That may be one. But I think the other reason is that the reason why this country is so highly regarded as a soft power is really nothing to do with politics at all. It's much more cultural, musical, movies, television, culture in the broadest sense.
The royals.
Popular, royal family, all the rest of it.
BBC.
I think it's not.
The BBC.
Well, that's media. And I think that our media is a crucial part of our soft power, our broadcast and our print and our digital media. And at the same time, I might just give you two figures. There are now more Hollywood blockbusters made in Britain than there are in Hollywood now. And as of October of this year, there will be more television and film studio space in Greater London than in Greater Los Angeles. That's soft power.
Okay. Thank you all. We'll hopefully come back, well,